Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar presented by SATO. We will be recording today's webinar, and I'm now going to turn it over to our speaker, Stephen Hull.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Hull with SATO, and just wanted to give a brief history of SATO, which we introduced the first thermal transfer barcode label printer back in the early 1980s. Since then, we've continued to be an inventor, an industry leader in the barcode label printing and RFID label encoding space with both our thermal and laser printers, and they're in various industries, of which many are using GS1 barcodes, which is what we're going to talk about today. And with me, I have a fantastic SATO partner and friend that will help us understand why GS1 barcode verification and validation is important, and what it means and how we do that. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to David Holliday with ID Technology. Again, a great partner of ours that utilizes a lot of our printing equipment in their applying equipment. And David?
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. I always wanted to be a brilliant partner, so that's really good. And first of all, let me thank the SATO folks for letting me hijack your webinar to talk about quality control of barcodes, and also to thank the GS1 folks for setting this up and giving us this opportunity. So ID Technology, which is where I work, I'm Director of Product Marketing here. ID Technology is part of ProMark, and we are a major company in the packaging industry. We have a total of nearly 30 product brands, and our annual revenue is approaching $1 billion. So in an industry that has a lot of small companies, we are actually one of the big guys, which is kind of cool. Our business line is ProMark Labeling and Coding, and currently we consist of 7 product brands that are based either in the United States or in Italy. We've been a partner of SATO for a long time. Both ID Technology and our EPI product brand use a lot of the SATO print engines in the print and apply labeling systems that we build. And I think I'm right in saying, and Stephen will correct me if I'm wrong, that we're actually SATO's biggest customer for this type of printer, the OEM print engine. And they've always done a very nice job with keeping us happy with the products they build for us. So to look at what we do together with SATO, we use SATO printers on the inline integrated printer applicator systems that we build. And what's in the photo on the slide, which I hope you can all see, is very typical of the kind of thing that we do. In this case, we're printing and applying a GS1, or in fact 2 GS1 128 barcodes onto shrink-wrapped trays. But quite often they could be shipping cases or similar types of product. Traditionally, these would have been ITF-14 GTIN barcodes. But today, the trend is very much more towards GS1 128 onto these kind of products that go through supply chains. As most people on the webinar are probably aware, GS1 128 allows for much more data to encode, providing way better options for traceability, which is something that's becoming more important every day, and one of the reasons, if not the reason, that we need to have accurate, correctly encoded barcodes every time. So we can print and apply beautifully printed barcode labels onto products every day. But what's really important is this barcode that we've produced correctly formatted? Is it a genuine GS1 barcode? And is it scannable everywhere? It's one thing me being able to scan the barcode with a scanner in my own factory, but how do I know that it's going to be scannable everywhere else. Well, it looks as though the slides have a mind of their own here. I didn't touch it, I promise. So the reason that supply chains work is because of the standards that are put in place by GS1. So how do we know that when we print a barcode, it's actually in compliance with those standards? That's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this presentation. So what's important when it comes to these barcodes? Well, you can see on the screen here a pretty common looking GS1 128 barcode. If you sell into most of the supply chains, into retail or food, you're probably printing things that are quite similar to this. But we need to know, as I mentioned just a slide ago, that the structure of this data is correct, and we also need to know that the quality of this barcode is correct. And we have two separate tools that enable us to be sure of these things. The first one is what we call validation. And validation is all about the structure and the correctness of the barcode. The second one is verification, which is all to do with the quality of the barcode. Now, it was described to me many, many years ago, and I actually got involved in barcode quality control in the supply chain for the Department of Defense, and if people think that GS1 barcodes can be complicated sometimes, you should try to decipher some of those MIL Standard 129 barcodes, which can have up to 100 fields embedded in them. So validation in that industry, as for packaging, such as we're talking about here, is really important. And it was described to me as being like spelling. Are all the correct symbols and characters there? Are they in the right place in the encoded information? Is everything present where it should be? So that's very much the validation. Verification was described to me, and I haven't, to be honest, found a better explanation over the years, is that it's like penmanship. The quality of that barcode. Are the strokes correctly dark? Are they the right thickness for the different bars? Is the barcode consistent across the whole printed area? That's verification. And to be able to print our barcode on a package that we're going to be shipping into the supply chain or to one of our customers, both of those are crucial. So we're going to look at them in turn, starting with validation. And validation is important because if my barcode isn't structured correctly when I ship it, it isn't going to respond to my customer's barcode scanner the way that it should. And we all know what happens when things like that don't work. So let's look just for a second at what's in my barcode. I'm assuming, because everybody here has an interest in GS1 and barcoding, that everyone is familiar with the concept of an application identifier. If not, there's plenty of information out there that we can find for you, but I don't have time to go into that kind of depth today. So in this barcode, I've actually encoded 3 application identifiers, or AIs, as GS1 shortens it to. The first one being the GTIN, which is the building block of just about everything in the GS1 world. And again, I'm sure that everyone is familiar with that, but we can help you afterwards if you're not. I've also encoded a batch or lot number, which is the ABC 123. And I've also encoded a serial number, which is just a number that I made up. The important things with these are that since all of those data elements are there, they need to be encoded correctly for a scanner to be able to decipher them. So what I tend to use, and there's a lot of tools that you can use for validating a GS1 barcode. What I tend to use is actually an app on my phone. And I think that's great because I don't have to buy any additional equipment to be able to ensure that my barcode will validate. And if you go off to, if you don't have this already, if you go off to the Apple App Store, there's an app called Barcode Check. And the guy that wrote the app, I'm told by some of my friends at GS1, actually worked with GS1 to come up with this application. So whereas there are many, many barcode apps, if you go to the App Store, this is the only one that seems to have a kind of informal GS1 approval level. And it's really cool because it gives you a lot of information as to what's happening within the barcode that you validate. Now, in this case, I validated my barcode and I just scanned it right on the screen on my PC. And you can see in the little screenshot in the bottom right here that everything has come up green. Coming up green is always a wonderful thing because it means that the app is happy. It actually, in here, I can go into a certain amount of depth into what all these different application identifiers, these AIs mean, and how they should be constructed. But in this case, I'm going to leave this one just as it is because it's validated, it's fine. So I know that what I have is a 100% valid GS1 128 barcode, which if I'm looking to ship products is a really, really good thing. And I've done it real quickly and at the cost of $20, which is the cost of this application in the Apple App Store. So I'm very pleased with that, and I use it a lot. I can't say enough good things about it. I have no connection with the guy who wrote this, but I think you'll really like it. So let's have a look at a couple of other barcodes. I have here barcode A and barcode B, and they're not the same, right? They look as though they're the same. They have the same human readable information under them, but one's obviously longer than the other, so they're not quite the same. And the question is, can my validation app tell me what's going on here? I think before we actually go any further, it's worth mentioning, and I'm going to mention this more than once, that the easiest way to generate compliant GS1 barcodes is to use the GS1 wizard in your favorite label software to be able to build these correctly structured barcodes. Excuse me. Here at ID Technology, we sell Nice Label and we sell Bartender label software. Both of these allow you to very, very easily produce some compliant and correctly structured barcodes, to the extent that in my examples that aren't correct, I actually had to cheat and tweak them outside of the label software. So let's have a look at barcode B, because this one is actually pretty easy to handle here. If I do the same thing as I did with my original barcode and I verify it with the Barcode Check app, you'll see that this one is not so happy. Is not so happy with me. I have a red rectangle on my results, and if I look at the screen, I can see very quickly that the reason I failed, which is what I've done, is because I cheated and I've replaced one of the numbers in the GTIN with a letter, with the letter A, although any letter would achieve the same thing. So a GTIN is always numeric. It only contains the numbers 0 through 9. So if I try and put any other characters into there, it's going to not validate, and it will be a fail, which is what I did in this case. It also will fail because of a check digit calculation, because the check digit for that part of the barcode only works on numerics rather than alphanumeric as well. So you can see, if I'd made this barcode and I was planning on printing these on some boxes and shipping them to my customer, my $20 investment in this little barcode app has already paid for itself many, many times over. So I would say that that's quite incredible ROI there. Now, let's have a quick look at my other example. So here's barcode A, and if I look at my human readable, which a lot of people might do, or indeed if I was to scan this with a simple barcode scanner, I could be fooled into thinking that this was a good barcode as well. And so this one is a little bit more subtle, but this is an error that I've seen a lot. And I know there are some GS1 folks on the call, and I guarantee that they've seen this kind of error quite a lot as well. So when I validate my barcode using the Barcode Check app, you can see everything is green. So what that's telling me is that this is, in fact, a valid GS1 128 barcode. So you could say, right, we're done. Let's ship these products. But what's happened is, if you look through the little results screenshot, you can see that the lot number and the serial number have been combined into one field rather than into two separate fields. And the application identifier for the serial number has kind of disappeared completely. I'm not going to answer this one now. I'm going to save that until the very end of the presentation. But if you've tuned in and you know the answer to this and why this has gone wrong, you can award yourself 1 Barcode Geek point. So as I say, validation is really important because it's quite an easy way of being able to tell that your barcode is at least structurally correct as far as the GS1 standard. And I totally advise our customers to validate every barcode at the time you print it. And you can see I have a couple of pictures on this slide. The one on the left shows a SATO tabletop printer, and it has an optional barcode validation system that will actually validate the barcodes on the label in real time as they're being printed out of the printer. That's a relatively inexpensive option. It can save a lot of pain and cost down the road. So that's something I would hugely chat with Stephen or the other folks with SATO about how you can use that in your operation, because that's important. Now, my other picture is one of our integrated printer applicators where we've built a validation system right into the labeling machine. So what we're doing in this case, we're using a tamp pad to apply the label and onto a box, and as the tamp pad retracts, we're scanning that barcode right away. So a number of things happen in this case. One, the fact that we're seeing a barcode shows that the label has in fact arrived on the box. So I think that's a huge plus in a labeling application. And also we can validate it and ensure that the structure is correct. And we can also feed to our scanner the data from our customer's PLC to ensure that the data that's encoded is correct as well. So we're actually doing 3 jobs with one scanner or all in one go. And what happens in this case is if there's a missing label or an incorrectly printed label, that particular box would be rejected from the line. So this is great. And I would hugely recommend that you validate your barcodes at the time of printing. It's an excellent and, again, a relatively low-cost way of avoiding mistakes that could be hugely expensive, but it's not the answer to everything. And the reason to that is that validation tells you, yes, that you've structured your barcodes correctly, but it doesn't tell you that you've met the quality standard. basically what it's telling you is that that scanner can read that barcode. It's not telling you that any other scanner can read that barcode. So that brings us to topic number 2, which will be verification. And for those of you that read in depth the GS1 general specification, I mean, who doesn't, right? It defines the minimum quality scores for the different types of barcode that are used in the GS1 system. So remember, verification is the quality test, excuse me, the penmanship of the printed symbol on our label. So each barcode has a minimum score, a minimum grade that it has to achieve in order to be a valid barcode in the GS1 system. Failure to meet that level could result in unscannable barcodes and, shock horror, customer chargebacks. None of us want to have those. And I know in the past that some of my personal customers have shared with me invoices that they have from some of the big retail groups for non-conforming barcodes. And those numbers are pretty scary. So why are we going to verify? We have to verify because all barcode scanners are different. Just because I can read my barcode with my barcode scanner doesn't mean to say that somebody else's will. Yeah, it might be that mine is only just able to read it and my customer's is only just not able to read it, and that's something of a disaster. So in the GS1 system, we use ISO 15416 standard for our linear barcodes. And the minimum score that has to be achieved as a passing grade is 1.5, or C in the old ANSI standard, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second as well. If we were printing a 2D barcode, like a GS1 data matrix code or a GS1 QR code, in that case, we would be using ISO 15415. But that's completely out of the scope of what we're doing today. So here's an example of a verification score or a verification result from a microscan or an Omron, they are now, verifier. And thank you to my friends at Microscan for sending me this screenshot. And you can see in the areas that I've circled on here, there's a lot of different parameters that are inspected. Some of them are given a simple pass-fail. They score 4 for a pass, 0 for a fail. Others are graded, a number between 0 and 4. And the actual verification score for that label is the single worst grade. That always seems to me to be a bit unfair. But it's not an average, which is what I do, because I'm a more democratic person. It's the single worst score. So you can see if you get anything too low, your barcode is going to fail. Oops, my computer's doing strange things. Okay, so the old letter scores are what we're used to using, right? I mean, how many people have been dealing with their customer who's told them, hey, your barcode's not C or better. This is a fail. So GS1, very conveniently in the standard, always gives you the new ISO target numbers as well as the old ANSI equivalent. The same with my microscan screenshot, gives you both the ANSI and the ISO score. I have a feeling that in time, one will disappear and we'll just be using the ISO. But this little table shows you the correlation between ANSI and ISO. And C or better generally is still the rule. Now, a question that I'm often asked is, can we do verification online in the same way that we do validation? And the answer is, yes, you can, but it's not quite as simple. It no longer becomes a simple barcode scanner. It now becomes a machine vision application. It needs to have very, very accurate product handling, which is good for good labeling anyway, to be fair. It needs to have very controlled lighting and it needs to have a regular calibration procedure. So can it be done in line? Yes. I know people that are doing it very successfully, but most companies are actually using offline verification. So they will basically do sample testing just to keep an eye on quality trends. And that's something that seems to work very well for a lot of people. So how do we make sure that our barcodes are good? It looks as though I've used up most of our time already here. I'm just talking too much again. So the key things are, first of all, make sure that your label template is correct. Yep, if you're using barcode software, such as Nice Label or Bartender, use the GS1 Wizard, because they're pretty foolproof when it comes to making compliant and correctly structured barcodes. If you need to have the file in your printer language, those barcode packages can export the label as a file that makes it ready to use for you in the SATO, SBPL language, for example. So that's important. Use high-quality label printers and labelers, and please maintain them properly. Make sure you keep the print heads clean. Make sure you clean the platen rollers on your printers, because you will see a difference in your print quality. Please don't buy low-quality, cheapo labels. We've seen noticeable lower verification scores on labels that don't have a good quality top surface for printing on, regardless of whether they're direct thermal or thermal transfer. Invest in a verifier so that you can do sample testing to keep an eye on the barcode quality so that your scores don't drop too low. Integrate a barcode scanner into your system, whether it's the one that you can fit onto your SATO tabletop printer or whether it's an integrated one in line with your labeling machine. Make sure that your barcodes are validated correctly every time. So I'm getting to the very end here, but I have just one more little topic, and that's to do with my barcode example that passed validation but was clearly wrong. And I'm sure that some of you know the answer to this already. And it's all to do with the fact that some application identifier fields are fixed length, like a GTIN and dates, but others, like a lot number and a serial number, are variable length. The person who's printing the barcodes can make those any length that they want. So normally, if there's just one variable length application identifier in a barcode, you make that be the final field so that there's no trying to figure out where one field starts and the next field ends. But in this case, we have two, AI10 and AI21. So to help the scanner know when one field ends and the next one starts, a function 1 character is used as a separator. Now, again, if you're using the proper label software, it will insert that automatically for you. In this case, I sneakily removed it, which caused the last two fields on my label to be seen as one continuous field and no good for the purpose it was intended. So that's very important. So a number of other common problems you might see. I may as well use our last minute here. If you're making a GS1 barcode manually, quite often people miss off the function 1 character that needs to be at the beginning of the string, which is what designates it as being a GS1 128 barcode in this case. A lot of people also, if they're making barcodes manually, really want to encode the parentheses into the barcode. You know, the ones you see that wrapped around the AIs in the human readable. They only exist in the human readable. They're not in the barcode. I've seen other people who insist on printing the product UPC code in the case barcode rather than the case level GTIN. Another one is not enough quiet zone at either end of the barcode, allowing other parts of print to encroach in what should be that clear area, which is very clearly defined in the GS1 standard. So as I say, it may not be the most exciting document to read, the GS1 general specification, but if you have a general working knowledge of that, it can really make your barcoding easier and help prevent a lot of expensive mistakes. So all I have to say at this point is thank you very much on behalf of myself and Mr. Stephen Hull.